Welcome back to another UNC basketball podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you're checking us out on our YouTube channel, Tar Heel Illustrated. And don't forget, before we dive into this, we got a couple of days left of our promo that's going on. This has been the most successful promo we've run in the 7 years that I've been publisher at this site. It's very simple. Sign up between now and Sunday. It ends Sunday, April 25th. You don't have to pay until August 1st. That means you get the rest of the summer, spring and the summer, all of our recruiting stuff, the football and basketball, everything else that we do, you get it all for free until August 1st. You have access to our message boards. Let me tell you, David Sisk is dropping bombs on the message board like you wouldn't believe. Dina King with her Dina's Dandy, she's dropping bombs left, right, and center. And you know, June 1st, the dead period ends, so they're going to be able to get out and see a lot of kids. The coaches are going to see a lot of kids. We're going to be going crazy with content this summer. So if you're into recruiting for Carolina football and basketball, you've got to go ahead and take advantage of this offer. And it's free until August 1st. And if you happen to miss out, it's still only $8.33 a month for a 1-year subscription. So you really can't beat it. And you get to interact with me on the boards and read some of my, what some people might call wisdom. How about that, David? Wisdom from AJ, huh?
And
I put him on the spot.
Well, I thought you were going to give me all the credit for, the interest and stuff, which tells me there's not a whole lot of wisdom for anybody to make a statement like
so
that.
It's been the promo's been going real well because there's been so much going on, but also I think people are understanding. They don't have to pay until August 1st, so just go ahead and get on now. You get a chance to roll up your sleeves and dive into THI and get all kinds of stuff, including what we're about to talk about now and then some. In fact, this weekend, David's going to be in Indianapolis at the first event in a long time, the first big event since things are starting to open back up. And a lot of what David reports from this weekend, you're only going to be able to find on our premium content. So anyway.
First time I've been on the road, Andrew, since July 2019.
Wow. I was telling a few people about that today about how we got the spring game this weekend. You're going to be in Indianapolis. We got so much going on. And again, a lot of the stuff that David does is only premium, and you can only access it if you have a subscription. So you only got a few days left. So act now. I sound like one of those late night infomercials with guys that are selling like sponges that wipe everything off in one wipe or something. I don't want to be that guy. Anyway, we're here to talk Carolina basketball. And the Tar Heels have been very, very active in every conceivable way over the last month with transfer portal stuff, Roy retiring, Hubert Davis hired, more transfer portal stuff. So, David, what we're going to do is we're not going to recap. We're going to lend some perspective to what has happened with Carolina basketball with the transfer portal. We've done the Hubert Davis thing. Now we're moving forward with the additions that he's made with Justin McCoy and Brady Manic. They did not get Walker Kessler to come back to school. So essentially you trade Kessler for Manic for the 21-22 season. I actually think that's a positive trade for North Carolina for the next year. What are your thoughts in a snapshot of what Hubert's been able to do with the transfer portal?
Let me touch on Walker Kessler for a minute. You can't lay that at the feet of Hubert Davis. Walker Kessler left during the Roy Williams administration. Hubert Davis had nothing to do with that. And I personally think once you cut the cord, it's too late. You're probably not coming back unless there's no takers anywhere else. And obviously there were a lot of takers for Walker. So I don't think it's fair to count that as a recruiting loss for Hubert. I don't buy into that at all. Now, going back to the portal, I think we can look at things. We can look at individually where we talk about the two that come in. But we can also look at it collectively about them as a unit. But one other thing, too, I think it also tells us about Hubert's maybe his roster makeup and how the philosophy that he wants to play with offensively and the way he wants to build his roster because, they didn't have anybody like Manic last year, and they've not had anybody like Manic in a long time. Just somebody with that playing style for a big and then reading what he said about McCoy, that he's interchangeable at a 3 or a 4. He's looking for a lot of versatility position-wise. And North Carolina has been one of the few programs remaining in the last couple of years that have had designated positions. You're a 1, you're a 2, you're a 3, you're a 4, you're a 5. And there's not many of them left yet. So, when I heard, the word versatility, I was like, wow, that's something that we've not heard a whole lot around the North Carolina program, but it's a very popular word right now in the world of modern day basketball.
Yeah. Let me go back to Kessler. I agree with you on that. Kessler left because of the previous. It just didn't work out. The family wanted something a little bit different, so they moved on. My only criticism was maybe going too deep after him and not digging into the portal a little bit sooner. Now, when I put that on the board, when it was a little bit of a criticism, I also said, but Hubert can recover quickly. And I think he recovered perfectly with Brady Manic. But Justin McCoy, people thought, well, God, why is he the first part? Well, he's a part. He's a part that they wanted. So if you can get him now, go ahead and get him now. You don't have to go for the biggest fish and then try to fill in. You wouldn't get guys, if they're going to take 2, well, go ahead and get McCoy, get him on board, get him signed, all that kind of stuff. And they did that. With Manic, though, a lot of people thought with Kessler back next year, boy, Carolina would have a chance to have a great team. I think that they would be very good. And Kessler would certainly give them an element that very few teams have. Now Auburn will have that. But you'd still also have 2 bigs on the floor a lot. And Kessler didn't show enough this year for anyone just to automatically pencil him in as a stretch guy next year. He's a little awkward with his perimeter shot. I watched him shooting around a lot in warm-ups and after games. I didn't think he was ready to play a role 20 feet facing the basket 25 minutes a night, which is what we're going to see Brady Manic do. And as far as the inside stuff, he struggled in some inside stuff. He struggled against Virginia Tech and Florida State in the ACC tournament. He struggled against that zone, finding comfort up at Syracuse. So I don't think he was a ready-made guy just yet, and there's no guarantee he would have been next year. So for the 21-22 Tar Heels, I think Brady Manic is a perfect fit. In fact, I know you'll recall that a few days before there was any contact between Carolina and Manic, I put on the board, said, this is the guy they need to go after. If Hubert can get Manic, he'll fully recover from missing on Kessler. And we'll call him this because he did go after him. And then you can really start to see the 21-22 team taking shape. You can see where when there was thought by the Caleb Love camp of going elsewhere, that the vision that he had for somewhere else was going to actually come into play at North Carolina. You could tell where Armando was thinking about going somewhere, which were some of the rumors. We didn't really believe that suddenly being the lone post guy getting 30, 32 minutes a game was going to happen at North Carolina. They can do that, and they could do that with parts that fit in, with McCoy as a guy off the bench and Manic as a starter who's going to just stretch everybody out, not just one position. He's going to affect the other 4 spots on the floor.
The only the criticism, I don't think Hubert goes without criticism, but it's not on Kessler. It just may be that you lost Jonas Adu because that's a route that you chose to take. So you can land it there. Now, the question is away from that. Well, not a question, but the solution is that you can make up for that quickly because of the transfer portal. If the transfer portal wasn't what it is now, then maybe get caught your pants down a little bit. But, you can go out and replace it so quickly. So you bring Manic in, and I look at Manic and I look at McCoy both. And, McCoy is, I asked him when we spoke, has Hubert said anything about a change of style, maybe stretching and maybe playing more of a 4-out, a little bit more small ball? And he said he had, but what he wanted to do was be equipped for both styles, be able to play big with 2 bigs, but then be able to play step out. So I think, when you look at McCoy, like I said, he wants to play him more in a 3-4 role. I think we can look at maybe even Leaky Black and Dontrez Styles, where maybe the 3-4 are interchangeable. I think a lot of times you do that offensively. You can't tell who the 3 is, who the 4 is once they're out there. Now, I had a coach tell me one time, he said, when a guy tells me he's a 4, well, can he guard a 4? He said, you are who you can defend. And that's something that I've always kind of, adhered to. So, I think that gives you some versatility there. A guy can guard multiple positions, can step out, might be able to play, and inside a little bit. But I think that McCoy's minutes are probably limited a little bit. I mean, I don't know what he can get, but I wouldn't think he goes over 10 or 15 minutes a game right now with what's there.
Here's the thing I like about the McCoy thing is that McCoy believes that he could play outside. He believes that he could be a guy that faces the basket from beyond the arc and can hit three occasionally. And that's in a role that appealed to him. That's what Wake sold him. That's what Clemson was trying to. That's what people were trying to sell him for. And I think he went to Virginia maybe with that in mind, but for whatever reason, it just didn't fit. Sometimes guys just don't fit. What I thought was very interesting about him is the last 4 games of the season that he played. He did not play in the NCAA tournament game because he tested positive for COVID. But the 4 games prior to that, he averaged 17 minutes a game, and he averaged 6 rebounds a game in those contests. So he's a guy that are 5.5 rebounds a game. I think he's a guy that might be strong enough to defend on the block some, especially if he's your second big defender down low, because the way the game's going. He's also a guy that has a nose for the ball. There's going to be a little ruggedness to him. He's going to get after it some. And let's say they have to go really small at times, and Manic is a 5. He did play the 5 some at Oklahoma. Sometimes they had all 5 guys on offense outside the lane, but defensively he's defending as the 5. And McCoy is your 4. I think you've got some stuff that they can work with, and you can sort of see that vision that Hubert may have in mind about being able to have a guy that's comfortable 20 feet away from the basket, but on the other end of the court, as you were saying, he can defend a 4. I would think Justin McCoy can defend a modern-day college 4. Just watching him at Virginia, looking at some clips, looks like he's capable of doing that. And then the rebounding element, which I would imagine under Hubert is the emphasis is going to be very similar to as it was under Roy. And Roy has said for years the most important statistic in basketball is rebounding, because if you get the ball, they can't get it and score.
I go into Manic. If you read Derek Murray's the article I did with Derek, and Derek he puts together a lot of packages for players that the NBA organizations get. So a lot of information he's telling us about a player, he would tell if he would send that out. It's almost like putting together a profile for an interview. And so he's privy to all the information and all the database and stats and analytics that an NBA organization would have. And obviously talked about how good he is at shooting, very proficient. I think he said 11th percentile overall in the pick and roll. So he can do that. He's stepped really good in the pick and pop game, stepping out, stretching the floor. He's 6'9", quick release on a 3. So he stretches the floor. And Derek made the point, and I agree. I think he will be Caleb Love's best friend.
Yeah.
One point that I made last year that I really think hurt North Carolina was that there was not room to drive for the guards. Guys like Caleb wanted to get to the lane, and you had 2 posts standing in the lane. There was no room. And it just doesn't work in today's game. You've got to spread the floor and stretch it. So Brady Manic does 2 things. Number one, he can stand outside and create room for the drive and kick. Or if you're out on him, then Caleb Love and AJs Davis have a field day putting the ball on the floor, and DeMarco Dunn. And the other thing he does, too, is the pick and pop game. How are you going to defend it? You've almost, if you switch it, now you've got a big on Love, and he's going to take that all day long. If you don't switch it and you can drag it, you've got Brady in a pick and pop game shooting 40% from 3. So it's very difficult on how you're going to defend him. I would go back to the guys we saw like that. Dawson Garcia, Nate Lazuski at Notre Dame is one that really comes to mind. Just how tough they were to defend in the pick and pop. One thing he said that I watched about 7 Oklahoma games from Friday to Sunday, full length games, spent hours watching him. Derek lives in Oklahoma City. So he's told me he's watched him probably 30 times live over the years in Oklahoma. He talked about how tough he is. And he said, he's not worried about getting hurt. He likes it physical, the dirtier, the better in there. I didn't see that on TV. That's where you got to be there live to see it. And
Absolutely.
so he really likes that. He's not strong defensively out on the floor. He gets lost in pick and roll some. He's not a guy that can switch, but North Carolina didn't switch last year anyway. They hedged and recovered. That's what he does. But they said, he can go in there with big guys and actually bang, even though he's not the biggest, strongest looking guy. So there's definitely some things he adds to this team.
I definitely want to get into how these guys, and Manic especially, affects the other guys on the floor. We'll stick with Caleb Love. When I watched on film the pick and pop, the first thing I thought about was, man, that's what Caleb Love's dreaming for. Dreaming about because of what you said. But I'm going to ask you a direct question. How much does Manic help Love just being on the wing, being an option over there? Or does he help Love more with that pick and pop, which the option? Caleb can either flip it back to him or he can drive. And how much more does that drive help when the screen is set by Manic as opposed to just them being spread out and Caleb trying to take his guy?
Okay, so does he help more spreading the floor? Does he help more pick and pop? Yes.
With Caleb specifically?
Yes. For both.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, both ways. Both ways.
I envision that mismatch that you talked about. And if they switch and you get a big on Caleb and the other big down there, it's only Armando. And Armando, I think, is going to move more. We saw his game move a little more late in the year. We saw him utilize the dribble from the free throw line. So we might see him clearing out a little bit in those situations.
What if you do this? What if you just play a true 4 out, 1 in? And he's out. I'm talking about Brady. He's out on the floor. So he's creating all kinds of space, for the drive. What if Armando comes and sets the ball screen and you have the switch and now he can go? And so he's on the right wing. Well, you got Manic in the right corner. You can't help off Manic. So, he can go to work. Here's the thing that I'm becoming more and more convinced of in this game is I want guards who do not have to have ball screens, okay? If you watch Baylor, man, they had all those guards. They didn't need ball screens. They could just – Mitchell and those guys could just take you all and they had 5 or 6.
They could shoot, though, right?
Yeah.
But if you have shooters around you, that's effectively like a bunch of ball screens.
They created. So they got the floor spread. And they're going one-on-one, and they could dribble into that shot because if you played off, they could dribble into a 25-footer one after another one off the dribble. If you got up in them, they got to the rim. So I envision Caleb Love as one of those guys. I saw enough of him in high school. Caleb Love didn't get a lot of ball screens. Caleb Love was an isolation one-on-one guy. So I even think now that, you can put Manic in the ball screen simply for the pop. But let's go away from the ball screen where Caleb Love can really work when the floor is spread in a 4 out. And you've got Manic there. So Caleb Love's got all that space to just spread it out and go one-on-one, whether he's got a mismatch or not. And then that kick game. You draw the defense, you suck them in, you kick. The defense doesn't suck in, you shoot a layup. If the guy plays off of you, you shoot a 3 off the dribble. I think that's where you can get. I'll give you, for example, Alabama, Nate Oates. I know I talk about Nate Oates a lot, but I like his vision for all this. Nate Oates does not like a 5 out. And I read it and I went, well, why? Why does he not like a 5 out? And he says a 5 out crowds the lanes too much. You think about it, you've got 5 around, okay? You don't have as much space for the lanes. You cut that to 4 around in a post, the opposite short corner, now you've got a lot more room. It's almost like a football team. If you've got 5 wide receivers, you may not have as much room downfield for an open receiver to settle down in a pocket as you would if you had 4 wide receivers can still spread the field and 1 running back to kind of, suck. And then you just got more room. So I can see Manic in two different situations, really helping Caleb Love and RJ Davis.
Well, and also having the one going 4 out and 1 in, you also have the element of the dump down for the driver, so you have an option there than just going to score. Okay, I'm going to go you one step further about the spread, and this goes to the thing that jumped out at me. I thought I saw it before, but I never watched Manic during the season the last couple of years the way I watched him after Carolina started talking to him. He is a catch and shoot guy. He gets the ball ready to shoot immediately. It's an underrated skill that people don't talk about much, but he has that at a very high level. Kerwin Walton has an element of the catch and shoot as well. So he was a 42% shooter from the perimeter when he was the only guy that could shoot. In fact, he had a stretch there late in the season where teams were kind of getting out and forcing him to use a dribble a little bit. You take away that little stretch, he was at 47% from the three-point range the whole season. So now if you add Brady Manic to the perimeter and teams just can't focus on Kerwin Walton, suddenly that catch and shoot stuff that we saw before Spud started adjusting, that might return. You have two catch and shoot guys. You got one over here, you got one over here, you got Caleb doing his thing, and RJ Davis was a almost 33% shooter, streaky shooter. You got to assume he's going to shoot at a higher percentage. So if Leaky's not on the floor and Davis is out there as your 2 and Kerwin is your so-called 3, suddenly you've got all these different options for Caleb. I think that makes Caleb a better driver, but I also think it makes Caleb a better shooter because he won't force as many bad shots because he's going to have so many other good options out there.
I think this is where DeMarco Dunn comes into play too. So let me say this. I think you're going to see a drastic difference in the three-point numbers of Caleb Love, freshman and sophomore year.
I agree.
Experience, yes. But number 2, in a comfort zone. I think you've got to be comfortable when you shoot. And I think if you spread the floor and give him the keys to that, he's more comfortable. And I think when you're more comfortable, you shoot it better. So I just think just style of play could free him up. Now, you talked about Davis, but DeMarco Dunn comes highly acclaimed as a guy being able to put the ball in the basket in all 3 levels, especially on the perimeter. So let's say you've got Love, Dunn, Kerwin Walton, Brady Manic. All of a sudden you could have – I'm not going to – things have to go well, but the opportunity is there to have almost a prolific three-point shooting group. And you're deep. So if you want to get away from that and go some other routes, you can do it because you're going to have some depth. There are some different combinations. And one thing you talked about, the quick release, a quick release is very underrated. A quick release is huge because if you don't have it, I don't care. You just can't go out there and wind a shot up. And as I heard a coach tell a player one time, he said, I could lay down a butt and run to first base by the time you got that shot off. So it takes, you can't take that time. These guys are too athletic and too long. You've got to be shot ready. And what I mean by shot ready is you're down with your shooting foot forward. If I'm right-handed, I've got my left foot and forward. I got my pocket here. And when I catch the ball, I don't catch it and step on my right foot and go up. My left foot set, my right foot hits. The second the ball hits my hand and I catch and go up in the same motion. I don't catch, step, and then go up. I catch, my foot hits at the second I catch it, and I catch it and go straight up, and it's quick. Now, if you're Kerwin Walton at 6'5", that's huge. If you are Brady Manic at 6'9", people don't understand. It is hard to get to the shooting pocket in the vision of a guy 6'9". So if he gets that thing off quick and gets it, you've almost got to be with your face right here, your hand right here when he catches the ball. Because if you're a step away, it's too late. Because so he puts a lot of pressure on you. That's why you can't hip off, because that release is so quick. And at 6'9", you think about a guy that's 6'9", in 1 millisecond has the ball right here. That's over 7 feet off the ground. That is tough to get to.
Yeah, in watching that, I could think of 1,000 hours or more just spent in the gym just working on just that, perfecting that, and it really is. It was a joy to watch. So how much do you think Manic affects Kerwin? Do you think Kerwin gets more clean opportunities, less contested stuff because not only that, but you've got to still play help defense. So last year you could afford to have a defender go out and force Kerwin to use a dribble because you still had 2 defenders in the paint because Carolina had 2 guys in the block. So even if he kicked it back to Caleb or RJ and they drove, there's still two defenders in the block. Now if they're spread out and you go out and you try to force Kerwin to use the dribble, other guys are open. The cutter's going to be open going down the lane. It's going to create a lot of different opportunities, I think, for North Carolina. And Kerwin has to have the vision to be able to see it, anticipate it, and deliver if that happens. But I don't see it happening. Teams are going to have to defend a lot more of the court and have to be a lot more aware of everybody else that's around them more than they did before. And I'm not criticizing what they ran before. I just don't think with the way the guards played last year and what they were not ready to do, I don't think it worked well because of that. This stuff seems to make a lot more sense for their personnel.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be if they play to their potential. I think it's going to be tough to guard. It's going to be tough to defend. Your really good shooting teams from outside, they just don't have 1 or 2 guys. It's not like, okay, we're going to make 15 threes this game, but the only good 3-point shooter we have is Andrew Jones. So we're going to bring Andrew Jones off staggers all night, and that's the way we're going to get. It doesn't work like that. Everybody you've got out there on the perimeter can shoot the ball. You look at the really good 3-point shooting teams this year and go back, and I would guarantee you that they may have one guy that might be a little sketchy, but that would be it at the most. The hope is that all 4 guys you've got out there on the perimeter can pull that shot off. I think you look at Notre Dame. Notre Dame has gotten too finesse. But it's to the point. It's kind of like watching PE. But I really think a lot of times that their best player might have been the point guard, but I think he kind of hurt the offense a little bit because he couldn't shoot the ball. He tried to penetrate a lot. So what if you've got a point guard for Notre Dame that can shoot, man? Then they're really tough to defend. So but I think, like I said, there's a potential lineup there where they can put a host of shooters out on the floor.
So how does Manic help Armando Bacot, especially with Armando now being often the lone true post player and more room to do what he does? And I actually think it's going to increase his opportunities. One of the things that bugged a lot of Carolina fans last year, and certainly sometimes when you're watching the game, you're covering the game, you think, boy, Armando had a really nice game, 14 points, but he was 6 to 7 from the floor and had a couple of free throws. He didn't get enough touches. He didn't get enough scoring opportunities. I think his scoring opportunities increase, not just because his minutes increase, but I think he's going to have opportunities that he turns left or turns right. He's only going to beat one defender. The help side is going to be far away, and he's strong enough, big enough, experienced enough, and skilled enough. He's going to have a lot of opportunities to post big numbers. How do you think this helps him?
Yeah, and the opportunities won because, number one, you're not – it was basically all your inside touches were distributed over 3 players. So, obviously that's his just opportunities are going to go up because of that. But secondly, and they'll do 2 things. Number one, when he posts, they get him the ball. We talked about that lineup. Who are you going to help off of? So, it takes double teams away. Secondly, if you can penetrate that lineup and Caleb and RJ really get into the lane because they've got space, the modern day game is to put the big in opposite short corner called the dunker spot.
Yeah.
And what happens is the guard, the ball handler, not necessarily the point guard, but the ball guard gets deep into the lane. The last line of defense is the back man guarding the 5. He has to step and help on the ball. Now you've got that 5, which would be Armando breaking to the rim. So he's making a bunch of catches, and the guy playing with his back to the bucket in the NBA, there's not many of them. And, it started all the way back. I think about Tyson Chandler, that played for years with Chris Paul. And you go on to, what was the guy, the center with the Clippers? when Chris Paul went to the Clippers, and it was all they did. He just threw lobs. He set the ball screen and rolled, and they threw the ball up, and I'll think of it in a minute. But those guys made $300-400 million over a career. They were 7 feet, and they couldn't shoot the outside shot, and they had no post move. They had no back to the bucket moves. What they did was come off the ball screens, or they played short corner, and Chris Paul just threw it up. I mean, they just went and got the ball. So, that's a lot of what a post does in the modern day game.
We haven't talked about Leaky Black yet, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on how he'll be affected by this. Before you answer that, I'll go ahead and give my take very quickly. I think there's kind of a question mark around Leaky, how he fits in. I think that a podcast we did a few weeks ago, I said, I think some of the things that Leaky is not best equipped to do were exposed a lot this year because he was forced to try to do it because they didn't really have answers in the perimeter. They struggled so much that sometimes Leaky took threes when he really should have been taking threes. Sometimes he was forced to try to drive into a lane that already had 2 defensive bigs in there, and he's not an explosive guy, so he's never going to get to the rim in those, rarely ever going to get to the rim in those situations. So they kind of expose where some of his limitations are. I actually believe there's a chance that if you surround him with 4 guys who can score, 3 of them who could shoot, and there's the driving element with a couple of them, that Leaky as the glue guy, as the high IQ basketball guy, as the guy who's okay getting a few assists, getting a few rebounds, getting a few steals, racking up the defensive assignment on the other side, and filling the lane in the break and stuff like that. He actually might be more valuable in a situation like this than a year ago because what you're asking him to do, the scope of it's narrowed a little bit, and it plays more, and it accentuates his strengths a little bit more. What do you think?
Yeah, and DeAndre Jordan was the guy I was thinking of. Yeah. But Leaky, like I said, there's going to be situations. Do you want a more athletic group on the floor? Do you want a shooting group on the floor? I think there's combinations. I look at Leaky right now, and Leaky's outside shot has to improve. And he made some threes last year, but it was almost like when he shot them, he couldn't believe they went in. It was really him kind of getting to the rim, and that was his game. But he ought to be a good defender. He brings you length. He's a bigger wing. But I'm curious now, and they never went to it last year because I thought somewhere along the line they might go smaller. Can he play the 4? So is he in the same, is he in that same boat where the 3-4 is kind of interchangeable? Can he guard the 4? I would look at last year's team, like when they played Notre Dame, I think he would do a lot better job stepping out and guarding a stretch 4 than Garrison Brooks would have. So I think there's going to be situations and things happen during a game. And that's the whole thing. I don't think you could designate minutes in a college game as a coach and say, all right, Leaky, you're going to play, you're going to start, and we're going to play you from the 20-minute mark to the 15-minute mark. Then we're going to put you back in at the 8-minute media timeout. You're going to play to 4. So you're going to play 9 minutes, and then we're going to play you. So this is the 18 minutes you're going to get every game. Coaches make adjustments. So I think there are going to be situations that are going to call for Leaky Black when you have to have better defense. Maybe when you want to get out on the break, you want to go more athletic. But like I said, that 3-4, because he should be able to switch to me and guard a lot of these 4s. I don't know about guarding the 5, but guarding a lot of these. But if they go really small, yes. But still being able to step out on that perimeter. And here's one thing Leaky can get you. Let's say you're spread out. He's the guy that can put the ball on the floor. What if you've got he's at the 3, and you've got, let's say you've got Kerwin Walton at the 2. He can play the 2. So you've got Caleb Love. You've got Kerwin at the 2. You've got Manic at the 4. That gives more room for him to drive. He doesn't necessarily have to. And that's what I said. Sometimes you can get away with having one guy that may not be a three-point specialist. Now, I don't think you can have 2 or 3 of them on the floor, but there's still opportunities for there, and that's going to come down to roster management for Hubert Davis.
Leaky had trouble getting by people at times last year, but I sometimes, in covering the games, it often looked like they are so stagnant on the perimeter.
Yeah.
That when a couple of times Leaky would get the ball in the wing, and he doesn't have a quick trigger, so it gives the defender time to come up and play on him. Then he try to get by, and he should get by, but there's like no room. 2 dribbles, and there's another defender there. Sometimes it looked like 5-on-6, 5-on-7 when they tried to drive because of the lack of movement, lack of space down low. So in a more spread out situation, when his guy can't play right on him, he has to play off because someone has to help out. And if you're going to leave a guy, you're going to leave Leaky's man's going to leave him because he's not a very good 3-point shooter. So that might give him opportunities to get by somebody, and then he's got to clear up in space. And he's a good passer. So you talked about that weak side with the 5. He'll be able to, if the defender comes on him, he'll be able to find Armando every time with a lob, with a bounce, with all kinds of dishes. He can get the dump down to him all night long if he can get into the lane.
I'll make this short and sweet because we've already commented on him, but do you think, and you answered it, does two bigs in a lane favor Leaky Black's skill set?
No.
It doesn't. It takes away what he does. So I think
if he could shoot, what did I tell you guys? And I said this before. I don't think they had a 2 big problem so much this year because I think you can still win with 2 bigs. You have to get the right stuff on the perimeter, make everything move.
That's why Cohen Walton.
Leaky was not the right kind of offensive 3 to play along with 2 bigs. I think that was the biggest problem.
That's why Kerwin Walton really kind of excelled, because in that offense, you could still be in a situation where you got caught going under a screen, but you had to be aware of those bigs. Sometimes you would get caught trying to help. Of course, they had all the cutting and screening, and Roy could get a guy shot, but but it wasn't set up for everybody to get that shot. So, it's basically a set for a guy. So he could call a set for Kerwin Walton and get him a look. So, but it's going to be a lot more in space, a lot more wide open. I think a lot more user-friendly.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. So right now, there's still going to be some more things that happen moving forward. I know that they're looking at some high school kids. We've reported that extensively on our board mainly. So with the portal, if regardless of who else they could add, whether it's high school, I don't think they'll go portal again. It's possible, but certainly with high school, I'm not going to go on the record with that. I'm not going to ask you to give a grade, but on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being outstanding, how much do you think Hubert improved next year's team by getting McCoy and Manic?
7. I don't think Manic's a savior by any stretch of the imagination, but he's kind of what they needed. Now, if Baycott doesn't come back, and I think we can agree that he will.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't, then that loss, ask me again, and I may drop that number, because not getting a true 5 with either Walker Kessler coming back or not getting a due, then you've got an issue.
And I think that was that time lost when he was going after Kessler.
Yeah.
He could have been looking at some guys that ended up going elsewhere. And that was my criticism about that situation.
Now, I'm going to say this, and I'll give you a little story. I had an individual that we spoke about, you and I, and you'll know who I'm talking about. It's a media member. And you asked me about him, and I told you he was a fanboy. Not for North Carolina, okay? I get a text out of the blue last night about 11:30. I just laid down, phone goes buzz. And
I know that's like.
Yeah. But there's no news. It's a guy said, "Hey, what do you think about the Hubert Davis hire?" At 11:30 at night. So I say, man, he said, do you think they got the right guy? I said, is it a good hire? And I said, look, I don't think you can say for surety when they hire a guy, this is a home run hire or this is a horrible hire. I think you give it 3 or 4 years and see what happens. Because I've seen plenty of coaches, and you have too, that I have no idea how they didn't succeed where they were at. I thought they were going, and then there's been other coaches that you never thought would make it. And 20 years later, you look up and they've got statues out there in front. And I'll give you an example. I thought Shaka Smart was the home run hire at Texas if there ever was one. And everybody.
Archie Miller at Indiana. That was a
total. Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure I've been trying to think of more, and I'm sure you could. I'll give you, and then, so he goes to Texas. Rick Barnes goes up to Tennessee. And I live in Tennessee. I've got friends who are big. One of my best friends is a huge UT booster. And they were in revolt when Rick Barnes got hired because they thought he and Dave Hart were old buddies from Lenore-Rhine. And they basically set up a parachute package for him to retire on. And
yeah, that's what a lot of people thought.
He was biding his time to retire. And you look, man, Rick Barnes, Tennessee's going to be preseason top 10 next year, and Shaka's in place. So, and then this guy tells me, he says, well, I'm going to call it now. They made a bad hire. And I went, okay, I'll file it away. All right. I don't want to tell me this. But and the reason I say that is we will see. There's just so much out there, so much in the future. We'll see how all this plays out, who they add. But here's the thing. I saw that it was either Jeff Goodman or Borzello. Right now it's got North Carolina preseason number 19 next year. So, Hubert, and we talked about this during the year, that they could be one season away from having a really good team. So I don't think he steps into a bad situation at all. We'll see. Really we don't know if he can coach or not. We'll see. We don't know if he can recruit yet or not. I mean, we're going to see. So you just got to be patient and give him the benefit of the doubt. There's a lot of variables out front of us. Just see how these things play out.
He's got a lot of parts. He's got to make those parts work. He's got a lot of parts, and he's got kids that can play the game that I think should be a lot better. They were the 325th most experienced team in the country last season. Next year, they're adding a guy who will be 21 during the season and a guy who will be 23 during the season. 21-year-old spent 2 years with Tony Bennett. He learned something about basketball. 23-year-old is the number 14 all-time leading scorer at a school with a pretty good basketball tradition. They got a pretty good tradition in Oklahoma. So you add that to everybody else coming back and being older, wiser, more experienced. They're going to have a pretty normal summer, I believe. This is what some people who are close to the program have told me. They think it's going to be a normal summer with all these Carolina pros coming back. The best thing for Caleb Love is for all those dudes to come back and play him and beat him into the ground and force him to get better. Same with RJ, same with Kerwin. Kerwin's got to add a lot to his game. Just can't be a shooter. You got to make that defense move. You're not going to move. You're standing around. You had, how many times have you told the kids that you've coached, the easiest thing to guard is a tree or a fence or a signpost or something like that. So Kerwin's got to learn how to move. And those guys will come back and they'll force him to move. They'll play 3-on-3. You can't stand still in 3-on-3. You got to move. So I think the chance that these guys are going to improve a lot and be a pretty good team, a good first team for Hubert to break into, especially some young guys that are going to stick around. I think he has a chance to make it, but how he handles those difficult times, how he handles some inner conflicts on the team will really determine how well he ultimately does. Because these guys all know basketball. His associations in the sport are awfully impressive. He knows the game. He can look at the game on TV or in person, and he sees all 10 parts moving individually in his mind. How does he handle the other stuff? That's the difference between a good coach and a great coach. And we'll see what he has. And he's got the parts. He went out and added 2 parts, I think, that will help, that will make next year's team better than certainly if he didn't add those parts.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see, what else they add, if there is anything else. But, yeah, and I think I've said it on here before where Skip Holtz, got advice from his dad about coaching, and he said, hey, what do I have to do to be a successful coach? And he said, you've got to be a crisis manager. He said, because you're going to run in a 4 or 5 a day, and that's what you have to do as a head coach. So, that's obviously, what Hubert has to do. And I've seen so many coaches that did not succeed where they were at simply because they couldn't handle the stress level. They couldn't handle they couldn't handle just basic confrontation. Yeah. And some guys revel in confrontation, and they had too much, and it just had a toxic environment.
It's a different seat, and it's a different seat at North Carolina. And I think Hubert has a lot of what it takes to handle it, but we'll see. The kids are going to be looking at him in the huddle, in the locker room at halftime. They're not going to be looking at Roy. They're going to be looking at him. That's going to determine how well he does. He's David Sisk. I'm Andrew Jones. You've been watching and listening to another UNC basketball podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. Don't forget our deal that's going on, guys. You have until Sunday to sign up. It's free until August 1st. David's going to be in Indianapolis this weekend. The only way you're going to get any of his stuff except the one podcast we do will be if you have a premium subscription to Tar Heel Illustrated. And even if you don't catch on with this deal, it's still only $8.33 a month for a 1-year subscription. He's David. I'm AJ. Thanks for stopping by.